Thank you, folks, and thanks for coming. The weather's really nice here, isn't it? So I hear you have been plunged into the Scottish gloom for the last 3 weeks, so it's good to see the sun shining. So yes, I'm just going to meander through this, and I'm going to try and convince you that data science is actually vital for the future of medicine, patient care, health of populations, but also the sustainability of health systems. I think who here is paid by the public pound?
Dollar.
Oh, sorry. I bet you're glad it's not pounds, actually. So sorry, we'll do that again. Who is that? Yeah. So we have a responsibility to try and derive as much value from that. The health systems in which we work are pretty inefficient. So if you go to Gartner or McKinsey, they say that most health systems are working at 60% efficiency, 60%. And that's because they're characterized by waste, variation, and harm. And my argument today is going to be that we're a pretty special community, and if we collaborate at scale, we can deploy data science to improve the health of patients and populations. So that's the script. Let's see how we go here. Oh, it's working. So about 45 minutes, is that okay? I'll get you out for lunchtime, I promise. Global challenges, how we're approaching this at scale, the data piece, information science and big data as the catalyst for change. I think this center today, which was launched 2 days ago, is very important in that. Give you case studies and talk about how we're trying to gear up the whole of the UK on this agenda. So that's what I'm going to do. Before that, a bit of history. So we've got a health service, the NHS. It's outlived 14 prime ministers, soon to be 15 because we've got an election tomorrow. So this was the guy who invented it, and he said it's quite the most ambitious adventure in the care of national health that any country has ever seen. And it's a very socialist system, but we've still got it. Some people think this is Mrs. Thatcher in the bed, listening very intently. So that was 1948, that was 67 years ago. So our health system is sort of reaching retirement age. But in the same year, something very important was happening here. Michael, where's that? Do you know? There's a clue. That is not the Australian flag. Did you know where that is?
The US.
Yeah, well. Yes, you're really coming on. Yes. So this is the most famous epidemiological study. Any epidemiologists in the room? A few? Where's the most famous epidemiological study, arguably? Framingham. So this is Framingham Town Hall. It's 40 miles due west of Boston in Massachusetts. And it was in 1948 when we were inventing a health service. They were inventing the Framingham Heart Study. So all 5,200 town residents subscribe to our regular health checks for now 3 generations, and it's iconic. About 3,500. There's almost more papers than participants. It's not bad, is it? But I would argue it's one of the first great examples of where citizens have come together with scientists and healthcare providers to do something special. Okay? So what did they do? You'll be familiar with this. Serial measurements. Classical epi, measuring blood pressure, smoking, cholesterol, diabetes, links to heart attacks and stroke. So it coined the phrase risk factor, okay? And Claude Lafont, when he was president of the NIH, suggested Framingham has resulted in an average of 4 extra years of life. That's an amazing thought. Why does he argue that? I don't know if it's the same in Australia. In the UK, if you've got primary prevention of coronary disease, they calculate your absolute risk of disease progression over 10 years. Those quadratic equations are derived from Framingham, 5,000 folk. It's amazing. If you log on to the Framingham Civic website, they, with classical American modesty, suggest we are the town that changed America's heart. And they have done because of that intense knowledge. So this is early data science, I would argue, in terms of the impact. However, there is a new horizon, and as researchers we need to horizon scan. And the Human Genome Project, a map of 3 billion letters, Martin Bobrow, a mate of mine, said it's rather like reaching the top of a mountain pass and seeing in front of you a fertile plain rich with new ideas, new methods, new techniques, and new concepts for understanding the complexity of human biology and health and disease. And that's what John, is John Mattick here? He's not too well, but John would subscribe to that. You've got the Garvan, a beacon, a cathedral of excellence. So that's a great quote. I thought he could have improved it if he'd said, and informatics is fundamental to the success of this revolution. So I've just said that just to improve matters. So that's the background. So why are health systems creaking? Chronic disease. We've got good data in Scotland. These are our census data. And if you look, these are the last 80 years, the demographic profile of the population is changing. It'll be the same for Australia, I guess. And the reason that we've got pensions crisis is there are insufficient people at working age to actually care for those who require pension provision. So that's a demographic pressure, and we're seeing a rise of chronic disease with that. So in the WHO suggests that chronic disease costs 36 million deaths per annum. In my world of diabetes, we're seeing an inexorable rise. So by 2030, 500 million people on the planet will be living with diabetes. What's the population of the planet, Louise? Do you know? Roughly? It's about 7 billion. So there are 7 billion of us, so 500 million. So that's a lot of people. And I think someone was saying to me, is it Eastern Sydney? There's a lot of diabetes in certain ethnic groups, so where the prevalence could be 20-25%. So this is a major problem. And it's multi-morbidity. So in my clinic, sorry, it's a bit of an early morning slide, amputation, coronary vascular disease, retinopathy, stroke. And this has an economic impact. So the World Economic Forum, you know how they retreat to Davos every year? So in that right upper outer quadrant of Gartner, they have chronic disease because they suggest it's going to cost $47 trillion to cope with chronic disease. So it's a major pressure on world economies. And it's really the Americans who are struggling with this most because their GDP expenditure on healthcare is approaching 20%, which is just not sustainable. So this is a pressure. And we've looked at that in detail. So this was a study, a data linkage study of 2 million Scots, and we asked a very simple question. We published it in The Lancet. What is comorbidity like? So at the age of 70, 74, you see few people are disease-free or have one disease. The majority of people have 2, 3, 4, 5, up to 15 chronic diseases. And that's the way people are living now in older age. And that presents a fundamental challenge to the single disease focus that pervades medicine. Because at the moment, we've got a very specialty-specific approach to treating patients. So these are challenges. And the other double jeopardy is financial. So this is our austerity. And I understand even Australia's got austerity issues now in terms of your budget deficit. So we need to be able to deliver better quality care at reduced cost. So what we're trying to do is do that, better quality care at reduced cost, but not only focus on the care end of the equation, but also try to embrace the new biology, new methods for translation, trials and innovation all the way into patient care. Now, healthcare is the last major industry not to be embraced by the information age. And we need to address that urgently. And I firmly believe that if we do so, it will act as an accelerator for that pathway. So why is this important? So this was a famous guy in the UK. He published a report. He talked about the gaps in translation which challenge our health systems, but he also illustrated those computer science techniques that actually haven't been deployed in a systematic way in medicine. How many computer scientists here today? Good for you. Excellent. Thanks for coming, because you're the future. So, and what we're trying to do in the UK is get this convergence of specialties. It's not subjugation of computer science, it's a partnership with computer science. And just to show you how things change, the Rand Corporation, very respected American corporation. So this was in 1954. This is Mr. Rand, and what he is showing us they've created a model to illustrate how a home computer could look like in the year 2004, okay? However, the much needed technology will not be economically feasible for the average home. So that's what they anticipated, you know. And on this disk here, I've got 10 gigabytes of data, how wrong you can be. So there are huge opportunities for, well, for your careers, I think, if you work at this exciting interface. And what's going to happen in this space? So this is, again, a sort of foundational principle, which I quite like. So there was something called the Shakespeare Review a couple of years ago, and they looked at public sector information. How many data linkage folk have we got in the room, or people who use? Yeah, so quite a lot, okay? So you're sitting on a treasure trove. But what Shakespeare argued is that the digital revolution is entering a new phase, okay? First, it was about connectivity in new ways that vastly increased communications. America was clearly the winner. Now, before I go any further and criticize America, any Americans in the room? Oh, one, okay. Do you want to go and get a coffee? Well, so what, you know, they won because they had a large single market, heavy investment in basic science, technical application, innovation, and entrepreneurialism, okay? Think of Google, eBay, Facebook, Amazon, PayPal, Yahoo, Microsoft, Twitter, Apple. They're all headquartered on the west coast of America. America won. Who hasn't used a product from one of those companies in the last hour? Yeah, we all have, okay? However, and we're beginning to see this with the Internet of Things and the way we use data in real time, we're going to see phase 2, which is an equivalent leap, and this is about the capacity to process and learn from data in real time. And it will allow us to adapt and improve our services, businesses, bringing economic growth and social benefits. And the most important thing, improvements in how government works. But this is important. And the argument is countries like Australia and the UK, we've got pretty good public sector information, and we should be harnessing it. And again, this is the opportunity for data science. And I think Australia has a real opportunity to leverage this. So that's the background, just to show you what we're doing in patient care. So this is Scotland, 12 billion people. Do you like the new map of Scotland? This is, if we'd voted yes, they were going to rebrand the nation. So New South Wales isn't much bigger than this. You're 7.4 million, I think. So we've got 38 hospitals, 1,000 general practices, but we've tried to collaborate at scale across the patch. So this is Scottish Health Service on a slide, about $3,000 per capita in spend, 16,000 beds, 12,000 nurses. I sit on the board which administers this, so we spend £12 billion on healthcare. And that translates into activity, so about 16 million general practice appointments, 5 million outpatients, about 1.5 million. So that's our business, as it were, on a slide. But we're very lucky that we've got this number. So I believe you do have a number? Medicare number. Medicare number, but you don't use it. Is that right? But we can deterministically match, because every episode of healthcare is flagged by this. And it's now cascaded into social care as well. So it's pretty powerful. And it was introduced by this guy. You know, we all stand on the shoulders of giants, and this guy was a giant. He's still alive, and when I see him walking down the street, I say, Ronnie, you're a hero. Because he introduced this number into Scotland. And this was his book in 1978, and he said, a uniform method for indexing patient records in primary and secondary care will transform services and research, leading to a more integrated approach to healthcare. And I say it's the best pound that they ever spent. Because it has transformed our services, because it allows you to do that. And if I'm a patient with a chronic disease, I have a journey of care, and often that is very fragmented. And if you can join it together, it's really good for patients. So that's what we've done. Just to give you a few examples of that, the emergency care summary, the PACS, and the chronic disease management. So the emergency care summary, if I'm admitted to any hospital in Scotland, my attending physician, if I say yes, can look at my electronic health record. We have about 3.5 million accesses per annum, and it changes management in 20% of cases. Very simple. A national PACS, so this is imaging for the nation, and I think Sydney's well served in this. I was speaking to some LHD folk last night. So we've got a single PACS for the country, 24,000 registered users, and what it means is that if you're on one of any 2,000 wards, you can see what imaging has happened anywhere, basically. And it means that we have a 10% reduction in re-examination, so it's very cost efficient. So it's just very simple stuff. And lastly, diabetes, my area, we applied this to chronic disease management. So we've got a single clinical information system for everyone living with diabetes in the nation. We're now scaling this to other chronic diseases, 260,000. It's shown schematically here. It's called Sky Diabetes. So it links the general practices with the hospitals, with other relevant data. And the key principles for my friend from Intel is that it's clinically led. We're agnostic to the type, scale of platform and storage location of the data, and we use open data standards, interfaces, and protocols with good encryption of data in transit, and we separate key management from data management for secondary use. So it's how we run our system, and we take the provenance or the metadata with us. The other thing we focused on was quality. Do you have trouble with the quality of your data? It's always an issue, isn't it? So, but we really tried to push data acquisition to the front line, and we also had a team. So this is Richie and Janice, who were the initial team. And it's slightly tongue-in-cheek, but Richie's a great guy. He came running up to me about 10 years ago. He says, "Andrew, we got a few miracles." I said, "What?" Because Richie, he's very assiduous. He'd found 10 patients walking around the streets of Dundee who, according to the NHS, were dead, you see. So he said, "What are we going to do?" And being an academic, I said, "Well, we'll publish it." And for the statisticians amongst us, you can calculate a life after death range of 1 to 4 years and a resurrection rate of 0.092. But the important issue here, the quality of the data is absolutely vital. So it looks like this. I get lists of my patients. I can look at my prescribing. I can look at what the podiatrist has done, the specialist nurse has done, because medicine's a team sport. I can see what the ophthalmologist has done. I can see everything in that journey of care. Since 2007, we've recorded about 95% of key biomedical processes on every patient in the country. And that's translated into improved clinical outcomes. These were our first publications of standardized amputation rates going down by 40% and blindness by about 43%. And it's my hope as a clinician that we'll see a year in Scotland we'll have no cases of blindness due to diabetes, because I think it's preventable, which would be great. And on a national level, these are in diabetes care, about 120 less major amputations a year. Systematic approach to care. So, in the Times a few years ago, Mark Walport, who's the Chief Scientific Advisor to the UK government, published, "If you live in Dundee and suffer from diabetes, you've recently been taking part in a medical revolution," he called it. But I wrote to him, I said, "Mark, this isn't a revolution, this is what care should be like for everyone." And this is just consistent registry-based care to try and drive up standards and improve people's lives and the health of populations. So that's how you use data in real time to support care. Now, the real opportunity for us is to flip that into a research environment. Collect data once and use it often, and see a convergence of care with research. so that the research activity we have has impact. I think as academics, well, certainly in the UK, the final endpoint of a good paper isn't quite good enough anymore. You've got to push it through into societal benefit. And I think we're in a good space to do that. So what we're trying to do, this is John Saville, my mate, Sir John. He's Chief Executive of the MRC. What we're trying to create is a clinical research laboratory for the world, basically. So as Chief Scientist, I'm in a very lucky position that I can try and define the strategy for this. And we want to build Scotland as a health science nation. What's New South Wales famous for economically? Tourism, I guess, is it? No, I'm not. What's it famous? What are your big industries? Finance, yeah.
A bit of steel and coal.
Bit of steel. I thought I'd all been shipped to China. But the question for us is, because we do stuff in China, is what are our countries going to be famous for in 30 years' time? And we certainly think it should be the knowledge economy and health science, because we'll have run out of national assets. And certainly in the UK, the Chinese are buying all our best properties. Is it the same here? So we've got to think how we're going to create the economies of tomorrow.
Good coal seam gas going now.
All right, is that the fracking? You're a fracker. So what we're trying to do is increase public awareness of Scotland being a health science nation. And we were 40 years old. I've not been in the job 40 years, but in the strategy we said, what didn't we have 40 years ago? And it's great because medicine at the coalface moves really slowly, but it actually moves. We do have terrific innovation. So the Glasgow Coma scale came around in 1974. Remember that? Do you use it? Yeah, it was very funny because it was 74 developed in Glasgow, 1976 adopted in England, 1980 adopted in America, 1990 adopted in Africa, 2006 adopted in Edinburgh. I know you'll see that with your Melbourne. It would be the same here. Yeah, so there we go. What else did we not have? MRI, and the origins of this were in Aberdeen. So what else did we not have? Statins, big West of Scotland study. We showed them. So things do change in medicine. What else do we not have? Laparoscopic surgery. A lot of this stuff was done in Dundee. So I always use this slide to explain why you can never find a surgeon in a hospital, because they're all there. So population level, smoking ban in public places. So things do change. And I don't know, if I was in New South Wales, I'd want us to be known as a health science, world-leading health science environment. So this is what we're doing: strong basic science, systematic collaboration I'll touch upon, use of data, looking at regulation and governance of health research, collaborative arrangements with industry, and positioning Scotland and the UK as a single research site. And that's it on a slide. If you can do that, you can compete internationally, which is where we want to be. So we've zoned the nation. And I was speaking yesterday, it was great. So here yesterday I was at UNSW, and in the afternoon I was at University of Sydney. And you've got a great opportunity to collaborate at scale, I think, across the patch. And that's the way we've sort of done. We've zoned Scotland. And we've put funding into clinical research facilities, data, research imaging, project management, and tissue. So this is our imaging capability, and we've calibrated our scanners across the country to try and drive out as much of that unique scanner bias as possible, so we can do single studies. We've got single regulatory sign-off in Scotland, so you can have single ethics, single R&D approval, and now single contracting. So, and our median time to R&D approval is now 20 days. So, and you just go to one place. Similarly for ethics, we're down to about 30 days for ethics. So it makes research easier. So that's the script. Does it work? So one or two examples. Clinical trials. Any trialists in the room? One at the back. Good. So, well, come and do your trials in Scotland. because it's very efficient. The Scottish, I'm sure the Aussies would be the same. They're really happy to participate in trials, and that's allowed us to gear up our trial capability. And we consent to consent. So we've got a share register which has about 90,000 people who are happy to have their electronic health records scanned to participate in trials, and then they're contacted. And it works really quite nicely. So now we're not hemorrhaging activity in phase 3 studies. We are often the top global recruiter, first UK, that sort of stuff. So it produces a very efficient trial environment. And that has had an economic gain of about £11 million to about, over the last 3 years, £18 million of activity in trials, which is, it shows efficiency. You can drive activity. Evaluation of policy. So these are a couple of studies published in the New England Journal of Medicine using routine administrative data, ICD-9 10 coded admissions for hospital, to hospital for 5-year-old children. Before the smoking ban, showed in this line, there was a 5% increase per annum in hospitalization. After the ban, there was an 18% decrease. So it enables you to look at legislation. Currently, we're looking at minimum pricing of alcohol. And again, we're looking at using administrative data. And you've got terrific administrative data in New South Wales through the Cheryl data bank. So you've got a huge opportunity to look at policy. Other policy, in my world, we arbitrarily say if you've got diabetes, you need your eyes screened every year. Okay, we just say that. It's arbitrarily defined, but with the rise of chronic disease, one has to be really judicious about how one uses one's resource. So this is a bit of a busy slide, but what we did is modeled disease progression using our own Scottish diabetic population. And if we just cut to the chase, if you've got type 2 diabetes and 2 examinations showing no visible retinopathy, you can safely be stratified into 2-yearly screening. Okay? So it's using one's own data to stratify patient pathways based on phenotype. And the good news is, because that group's large, you can offer 44% fewer screening episodes in a year. So we've spun that back into the program. And the important thing is, as a doctor, I would say, oh, we've got more patients. We need to screen them all annually. I need more cameras, more graders, more resource, please. Whereas actually, it's about driving efficiency in the system. National programs I'll talk about, but we're doing this across computer sensing, across data science, across health informatics research, across digital health, this same model. And just to say that we like collaborating internationally. A few years ago, I thought, because Scotland produces oil, I thought, let's collaborate with another small oil-rich nation. So we went to Kuwait, where the prevalence of diabetes is 26%. It's horrible. So when I first went, I saw a 27-year-old with type 2 diabetes having his leg amputated at the age of 27. So it's a scourge. I hope you agree the Scottish national dress is more attractive than the Arab one. We've had great fun. Of course, Kuwait is dry, so on the British Airways flight out, I've never seen so much champagne being consumed, because everyone, if you're going for a week, everyone tops up. So you're not videoing this, are you? So we've partnered with Kuwait, and it's the same thing. And through Iridia put this in place. This is a Kuwait health network, and it shows how one can use legacy data resources or assets, abstract, normalize, and integrate them while maintaining the metadata and providing apps on top. So you can do this. Technology is not the challenge. This is the Kuwait Health Network. You get the idea. And lastly, genomics and personalized medicine. And this is where your opportunity, you've got some fantastic research institutes in Sydney and New South Wales. And to see this convergence of molecular diagnosis with clinical data is really exciting. So who thinks genetics is important? Who thinks it's going to be the answer? Who doesn't?
Part of the answer.
Part of the answer. Yes, that's a nice confidence look. So, it won't be the whole answer, but I love this slide just to show the power of, this was a 1976 Scandinavian study. So, the things people do, it's only epidemiologists who could do this. These are twins separated at birth, okay? And they managed to track them down. So it's a twin study. They tracked them down 20 years later, and they photographed them. So these are dizygotic twins, okay? And the thing about these twins in both the upper and lower panel is that they've been separated but and had different environmental exposure. So they've had different environmental stimuli. So if you look at the dizygotic twins, so different genetic information, okay, 2 over. What do you notice 20 years later? They're very different, aren't they? Okay. So these are the monozygotic twins. So these have the same genetic fingerprint, but they've had totally different environments, okay? So despite that different environmental exposure, what do you notice? They're identical, aren't they? So I also think it's amazing that the underwear is identical. And the haircuts, yes. So you know, genetics, but it's trying to craft out, you know, how genetics influences the predisposition, progression of disease, and response to treatment. And we've started to do this. So this is so-called population pharmacogenetics. This is one of the first ever studies of this. So we use routine data. So it's routine administrative and hospital data to define diabetes, drug exposure, therapeutic response, and then we put GWAS, so this is an old GWAS study, to ask, you know, who responds to metformin? Because if you look at, you know, the craft of medicine is to use pharmacotherapy. You know, in New South Wales, you probably spend, I would imagine, about $6 billion a year on drugs, basically. But when you go to see your doctor, an old professor of clinical pharmacology used to say to me, he says, prescribing's easy, Morris. He says, give a drug to 10 people. 3 respond, 3 don't respond, 3 don't take it, and 1 has an adverse event. And actually, that's trial and error medicine. If you go and have an antihypertensive prescribed, we don't know if you're going to respond. So we need to use information to stratify treatments. And metformin is great, but we don't know who responds and who gets bellyache. So what we're doing is trying to define response. But actually, this defines, was in Nature Genetics, define new biology, because we linked therapeutic response with a cancer cycle regulation gene called ATM, which we knew nothing about. And actually this study and others which we published has now resulted, I think there are 160 clinical trials globally looking at the use of metformin for cancer prevention, not for diabetes. So it's a lovely story, again derived from routine data. So we're looking at this at scale in the UK. Genomics England, we're sequencing 100,000 genomes in 5 years. And in Scotland, we're partnering with Genomics England in terms of the Stratified Medicine Scotland Centre. And we're using these data assets to define incident cohorts of patients. And then we track them up phenotypically with electronic health record, plus we have either baseline or serial molecular measurements. And this is the future of medicine. And it allows people to come and define their disease of interest and then look at the tissue imaging, omic, and e-health fingerprint for individual patients. And we've put this within a large teaching hospital. So this is just opened. This was a £1 billion hospital in Glasgow. And within that, we've put this innovation centre where industry, academia, and NHS co-create in stratified studies. So you get the idea. That's the imaging centre, and this is the footprint of our stratified medicine capability. So is this important? I was discussing on the way in whether Australia, are you doing a genome project in Australia? not at scale. So this bloke announced 200 million for 1 million people genomics. So like it or not, we're going to have genomic data. And we as data scientists or data linkers, we can't ignore this, because if we do ignore this, we'll get left behind, is my view. So how we embrace data science and move it forward, I think is going to be key. And what this has revealed is the complexity and heterogeneity of disease. So this was in Nature a few weeks ago. And this is important, because if I or one of my relatives had, for example, bowel cancer, I'd want to know what type of bowel cancer it was and will they respond to which therapies. So what Mike Stratton and colleagues did was look at 21 common cancer types. So that's histologically defined, ovarian or tumor site defined, ovarian, breast, etc. And across those 21 cancers, he looked at 4,700 different tumors, okay? And he asked a very simple question: what is the commonality of mutation across those 21 cancer types? And I guess it was, well, it's disappointing in terms of uniformity, because only in 13 genes was the mutation rate more common than 1 in 20. So cancer is, if I have bowel cancer, it's probably one of literally hundreds, if not thousands, different subtypes of bowel cancer. If we're going to understand this, we've got to collaborate at scale, just to have the numbers. And that's the basis of the Global Alliance for Genomics and Health. I chair the eHealth subgroup. Kathy North, do you remember Kathy? She was here. She works the clinical working group. What we're trying to do is to look at this at scale across the world. The aim is to combine genomic and clinical information across diseases, organizations, methods, and countries, so that we can understand cancer, rare diseases, and other things at scale. So what are the big issues for delivery? And I think this is the most important one. And this is a quote from Geisinger. It's a great health system. My personal attitude is always to try to collaborate rather than duplicate and compete in an inefficient way. And it's this word, collaboration. Because we all go to meetings where everyone says, yeah, we'll collaborate. And they're really saying, no. And if we're really going to move medicine on, we've got, because of this complexity of disease, there's going to be a real need to collaborate in the data space. So lastly, what are the big issues here? First of all, I've talked about this, the tidal wave of data and the need to align computer science and mathematics with medicine, and also looking at our data infrastructures so that they are streamlined. So the days of all having a hard disk under our desk are gone. It's the economies of scale. So that's number one, because this is the future of medicine. Did you like that one? I'll do that again. So, because it's going to become increasingly complex as we stratify. If we want to understand, what drugs you respond to, we need to be able to integrate molecular imaging, phenotypic, even self-reported data along this pathway. So I've not even talked about personal health data, and the use of unstructured data. But this is the world of medicine as we move forward. But the second big issue is that we're not very mature. So this is a blunt instrument, but it says, it's basically how digitally mature are our health systems from level 0 up to level 8. Because as scientists, we all strive for personalized medicine and prescriptive analytics. That's where we strive. If we're developing these solutions, how receptive are the health systems to actually receive them? And the answer is not very receptive at all. If you look at that 8-point scale, most countries are sitting at 2 to 3. So there's a lot of investment required in our health systems if this is going to work. Third thing is delivering at scale across the UK. And Louisa asked me to mention this multiple times. They've put £100 million in the last 2 years into this space to try and gear it up. And we've created 4 centres, one in Scotland, one in Manchester, one in Wales, one in London. These are the directors. We haven't got the gender bias, gender distribution very well. And we've spent money, so we've put up buildings, we've put private cloud, high-performance computing infrastructure in, we've got telepresence suites across the patch. And this is our Big Data Institute in Edinburgh. And it's great because we've got academia, got social scientists, we've got NHS folk. So we imported our Cheryl equivalent and we sit them aside alongside academics, social scientists, even industry folk to try and co-create. And this is this notion of collaboration at scale, and it's working. And this building is very, very popular, as you can see, because there's free parking, which everyone likes. And within that environment, we've got these data sets. So we've got these longitudinal data sets from birth to death, GP consultations, imaging I talked about, lab data, prescribing for the nation. So we have patient-specific prescribing for the nation. And we've also co-located our social scientist data sets. So educational attainment, transport data, air pollution, noise pollution data. And you can ask really fascinating questions across the patch through that co-location. So we're trying to do this across the UK, and I convene this thing, the Health Informatics Research Network across the UK. These are members of the team. So what we're doing, again, it's about doing this at scale and strengthening our position in data science in health across the UK. We're doing 10 things, which I'll touch upon briefly. But at the end of the day, you know, the impact level has to be international. That's where you want to be. You know, being the best in Edinburgh is great, but it's not really. You know, you want to be at that stellar approach. And our belief is that if we convene and come together, we will be able to do that. So public engagement, we've got a team that looks at this so that we engage the public in everything we do. I'll skip through this. Capacity building, so we're looking at data science curricula. So in Edinburgh, for example, we're moving to a 6-year undergraduate degree, and every student will be encouraged to do a data science qualification. So we're going to train our doctors of tomorrow. So that's that. Partnership building, so we're looking at industry, Public Health England, innovation centres, etc. Adding value to UK cohorts, so 2.5 million people, of whom about 2.2 are currently alive, are in a UK cohort. There are 34 of them. So what we're doing is linking, trying to get an automated outcomes-based follow-up based upon cohort participation. Again, driving efficiency across the patch. Cohort study linkage, this is Ronan and Jane Elliott who used to lead that. Methodology research and best practice in governance, because we put a lot of thought into streamlining our governance processes. And lastly, communications across the patch. And we can see where we would like to communicate into Australia. And why we set up the FAR Institute is to do new science at a much larger scale, to enforce greater interoperability and use of standards, build these partnerships between academia, NHS and industry, increase the skill base with public and patient advocacy. And I don't think any of these ambitions are particularly novel. I think they subscribe to your vision for your Centre for Big Data. As ever in life, it's all about delivery. So that's the script. Big issue 4, and this is, I think, the most important. So this is my mate Dave, and you're very welcome to come to Edinburgh, because Dave built this building. I thought that was the nicest building I'd seen, but yesterday I went to the Charles Perkins Centre. Now that's a building, isn't it? It's lovely. So Dave grew informatics in Edinburgh. So this is the ref, this is the power of UK research. And Dave put 1,000 informaticians into Edinburgh. And their research was rated as world leading or internationally excellent. But they were nowhere near medicine. They were just doing their own thing. So what we've done is co-located this mob in a healthcare environment, and it's going really, really well. Because if you look at what we want to do, I think we need to move away from data linkage and talk about data science. So if we talk about medical data science, we want to harness physical data, personal data, organizational data, and we've got the building blocks here, you know, genomic data, health data, social science data, healthcare data from operational systems. And what we are doing is bringing these new methodologies into medicine: machine learning, robotics, natural language processing. 80% of data in healthcare is not structured. So how do we harness those data? Social computation, security, linked data. And by using that blend, we're actually looking at new challenges, new therapeutic interventions, effective personalization, open real-time evaluation, integration in real time. So it's getting the chemistry right across domains. And alongside that, we've got the physical presence. So again, this is just Edinburgh. So we've got a supercomputer. We've got an innovation center. Peter Higgs won the Nobel Prize. So we've built a center for physics and astronomy. And this is our place here to drive data science into health at scale. And this is just Edinburgh. We've raised about 120 million to do this in the last 2 years, competitively, because we've got that critical mass of expertise. And if you want to be on the world stage, I just think this is the scale of integration, collaboration, and ambition that will deliver. So, and the flip side of that is the economic growth. This is a map of Edinburgh. Has anyone been to Edinburgh? It's a great city, isn't it? Yeah, so I'll touch on that later. So this is a Google map of Edinburgh, and what we've seen is companies starting to create a cluster and creating jobs and adding a data science capability. So lastly, and the biggest issue of all, who's this? Edward. It's our mate Ed. I think he probably did us a favor, actually. I think he did. Because we have to we're very privileged users of people's information, and we have to be trustworthy. So I say that with big data goes big responsibilities, Louisa, okay? So getting the governance right and the public participation right is really important. This was an important report by the Royal Statistical Society, and they did something very simple. They looked at public attitudes to the use and sharing of their data, okay? Published last year. And they're suggesting that there's a trust in data use is low for all institutions, especially the media and companies. But even GP surgeries and the health service, you know, there's a trust deficit. We've been really poor at engaging the public in terms of how we use information. So the trust in data deficit. Most institutions are trusted less with data than they are generally. Younger folk are more trusting with data than older. Our main concerns are usage creep, no personal benefit, and loss of data. So we can't do this. You can't have a big data center unless you're really on the front foot in terms of patient and public advocacy, transparency around governance procedures, and the safeguards we have in place. We've been sort of at this for 20 years. If you're inviting someone out in this space, Graham Laurie is terrific. He's the professor of law at Edinburgh, and he chairs the European Council for Law in Medicine. He used to chair UK Biobank Privacy Committee. And he would be great. And we've done lots and lots and lots of public engagement to try and get this right. And what we've been able to do is to put this into government policy. So we have a data vision for Scotland, signed off by ministers, consulted by the public, a data linkage strategy, I won't dwell on this, and then a framework for how it works in terms of a federated network of safe havens where these data are analyzed. And the analogy I use, because this is complex to describe to the public, we don't send data out on USB sticks and CDs. So we have a central linkage facility, and it's like, remember the reading library rather than the lending library? Remember there were some really special books you had to go to the place? So we don't have data travel. And this is really important in terms of the model. And just recently, I published the Health and Biomedical Informatics Research Strategy for Scotland, and it basically, again, puts this into policy. So Scotland can act as a single research site for data science in healthcare. And as I said, we're having a federated network of safe havens, and it's something that a model you might wish to follow here, working to common security and data sharing principles and standards. Okay. And part of that is to try and get single sign-off. So we've just launched a single National Privacy Advisory Committee, which will make decisions within 20 days. So you go one place to go to. I met, where's Alice? Is she here? She's been waiting 3.5 years for data. So she should have had a 3.5-year holiday, actually, and then come back. But no, this is about inefficiencies, so we have a duty to try and speed that up. And there is a lot of UK activity in this. This is Dame Fiona Caldecott, because we have a responsibility to be stewards of data. To be a good data steward, you also have a responsibility to share data when it's appropriate. Being a good data steward doesn't mean locking it away forever, which is some people's approach. So to conclude, I hope I've convinced you that data science and medicine is changing rapidly. And if we're really going to succeed, there are various ingredients for success. Firstly is the public engagement in everything we do. Are there any lay people here today? Well, we're all sort of lay people. Oh, the man at the back. Yeah. The cameraman. Thank you. Make sure you get my best side. If you would. This convergence of care with research, I think, is important, and environments which facilitate that. Because we're all, our common enemy is disease. It's not each other. Clinical focus, so start and finish with the patient. Collaboration of healthcare providers, academia, and industry. This integration of computer science, I think, is going to be really interesting in medicine. That's the sort of next frontier. We do have issues at board level, at health system level, of the maturity of systems, and this is a major challenge for us in Scotland, for New South Wales Health, and this issue about clarity about governance and data sharing, so the public understand how data are being used and what the benefit share and the utility is. This is my 5th visit down here. I think you've got all those ingredients, and I think you've got the opportunity to lead the way. Because the future of medicine, one could argue, is 4P. Have you heard of 4P medicine? It's going to be predictive, preemptive, personalized, and participatory. And it will be made possible by genomics, deep phenotyping, computer science, informatics, analytics, and this new social contract about people being more engaged in their own healthcare. So if you invite me back for the 50th anniversary of the Big Data Centre, I thought, what's it going to be like over the next 50 years? So I started with a quote, so I'll finish. So I quite like this one. The only place where success comes before work is in a dictionary. But then I saw this is a very famous hairdresser, so I didn't think I wanted to finish with him. So I thought I looked to North America for some inspiration. Do you remember Dan Quayle? If we do not succeed, then we run the risk of failure. So clearly a very binary guy. So here's the maestro. In the middle of difficulty lies opportunity. And I think you've got an absolutely terrific opportunity in New South Wales to lead, not only for the benefits of your patients and populations, but also to set an international standard in terms of how we should deliver 21st century healthcare. And I'll finish at St Andrews, because we're having our big conference. It coincides with the Edinburgh Festival, so it's great. And we're going there the 26th and 28th of August for the FAR International meeting. And if anyone would like to come, you're very welcome indeed. It's going to be a great celebration of everything that we do together. So I'll finish there. Thank you very much for coming, and good luck.